Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I join the Honourable Prime Minister and other honourable members in congratulating you as the 12th Speaker of Fiji's Parliament since independence in 1970. Mr. Speaker, you have our full support towards the discharge of your responsibilities. Your success is the success of the people of Fiji. It is their freedoms and their rights that you ultimately are the steward of. And most importantly, Mr. Speaker, you are the guarantor of dignity and decorum of Parliament, which is and shall always be a temple of democracy under your leadership. Mr. Speaker, before I move on, let me say a few words in Hindi. And it is quite historic, Mr. Speaker, under your leadership, and I want to thank you most sincerely for allowing Hindi and Itokai to be used in Parliament as a language. And I want to say a few words in Hindi on the occasion of the World Hindi Conference that is currently being held in Fiji. Speaker Mahoday, 12वां विश्व हिंदी सम्मेलन.
Could I just pause you for a minute, Honourable Deputy Prime Minister? Honourable members, just for the benefit of all in tuning into the translation, it can be heard by you Honourable members on Channel 2 on the audio system that you have in front of you. Channel 2. Thank you. You may continue, Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
माननीय स्पीकर महोदय, 12वां विश्व हिंदी सम्मेलन फिलहाल फिजी में नांदी में हो रहा है. इसकी उद्घाटन कल हमारे देश के राष्ट्रपति जी ने एक बहुत ही पारंपरिक स्वागत द्वारा किया गया. इस सम्मेलन में लगभग 1000 से ज़्यादा लोग भाग ले रहे हैं. सबसे ज़्यादा स्पीकर महोदय भारत से और अन्य देशों में जहां हिंदी बोला जाता है, हिंदी की पढ़ाई लिखाई भी होती है, हिंदी के जो विशेषज्ञ हैं वो इस सम्मेलन में भाग ले रहे हैं. भारत के जो डेलीगेशन है उसकी नेतृत्व भारत के लोकप्रिय विदेश मंत्री डॉक्टर सुब्रमण्यम जयशंकर जी कर रहे हैं. भाइयों और बहनों, फिजी still
Honourable members, I beg your indulgence here. All I ask is a couple of minutes to be given to our IT people at the top. You may continue.
Yeah. Okay, let me start again.
Honourable members, I am the speaker. I make the directives here, not you.
Hold your horse.
Continue, Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
स्पीकर महोदय, ये खुशी की बात है कि 12वां विश्व हिंदी सम्मेलन इस बार फिजी में हो रहा है. कल सम्मेलन की विशेष उद्घाटन और पारंपरिक स्वागत के द्वारा फिजी के राष्ट्रपति ने किया. इस सम्मेलन में स्पीकर महोदय लगभग 1000 से ज़्यादा लोग भाग ले रहे हैं. सबसे बड़ी संख्या में भारत से लोग उसमें शामिल हैं. कई ऐसे हिंदी स्कॉलर हैं, हिंदी के विशेषज्ञ हैं हिंदी साहित्य और हिंदी भाषा को पढ़ाने वाले, उसकी प्रचार और प्रसार करने वाले। भारत सरकार के तरफ से जो उनके डेलीगेशन है, उनकी नेतृत्व भारत के लोकप्रिय विदेश मंत्री डॉक्टर सुब्रमण्यम जयशंकर जी कर रहे हैं। फिजी सरकार की तरफ से कल रात को माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने विश्व हिंदी सम्मेलन का विशेष स्वागत किया है और उसमें हमारे साथी माननीय अटॉर्नी जनरल, डिप्टी प्राइम मिनिस्टर गवोका जी और डिप्टी प्राइम मिनिस्टर मानवा कमकमिदा जी भी उपस्थित थे। स्पीकर महोदय, ये विश्व हिंदी सम्मेलन फिजी के लिए एक ऐतिहासिक विषय है, क्योंकि फिजी एक ऐसे मात्र देश है जो भारत से बाहर, जहाँ पर हिंदी को एक औपचारिक भाषा माना गया है। और इस सम्मेलन के तहत फिजी और भारत की जो संबंध है, अन्य देश जहाँ पर भारतीय लोग गिरमिट प्रथा के नीचे गए थे, उनका जो मेल मिलाप है वो इस सम्मेलन के द्वारा बढ़ेगा। इसके अलावा हिंदी भाषा की जो प्रचार है, प्रसार है, उसको बढ़ावा मिलेगा। तो एक बार फिर मैं भारत सरकार और हमारे फिजी सरकार के जितने भी लोग इस सम्मेलन की आयोजना में लगे हुए हैं, उनको मैं विशेष धन्यवाद दे रहा हूँ। Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the lead up to the 2022 general election, we preached about an alternative to the bleak future facing Fiji and her citizens in the form of poverty, unemployment, state of decay of our public health and medical facilities, infrastructure, sugar industry struggling to survive, the agriculture sector in a state of neglect, record national debt levels, wastage, pilferage, mismanagement of public funds, and above all, a population gripped by fear because of lack of freedom. Mr. Speaker, during the campaign, we were attacked both on social media, mostly through fake and fictitious accounts by our political opponents, and a party that had been in government for 16 years, both as a party and an unelected regime. We were accused of racial persecution, economic deprivation, sacking and reducing wages in the civil service and removing tuition-free education, to name a few, if we form government. That was a fear spread by many of those sitting on the other side. Of course, Mr. Speaker, such behavior is symptomatic of those who do not want to give up power. And I'll say more on this later. But let me tell the people of Fiji, the People's Alliance, the National Federation Party, and Sudelpa coalition government is all about national interest. As the last 54 days of our governance has proven. Right at the outset, Mr. Speaker, in the immediate aftermath of the election, the Honourable Prime Minister, the election of the Honourable Prime Minister, and the formation of the coalition government a day before Christmas, the euphoria of the people, Mr. Speaker, was demonstrated through tooting of car horns, beating of tins as makeshift drums, and explosion of firecrackers, signified one sole fundamental element: freedom. Freedom. Fiji became free of the Fiji First government. The removal of the prohibited immigrant status on Dr. Padma Narsi Lal, enabling her and the children to bring home Professor Brijilal's ashes to his final resting place in Tambia in 9 days' time, is highly symptomatic. And I want to thank the Honorable Prime Minister for making that issue a campaign issue and his deep commitment to correct it. It will put to an end, Mr. Speaker, the 13 years of a tragic chapter heaped on a true son of Fiji and his wife banished from the land of their birth by a cruel and heartless regime refused re-entry by the former Fiji First government, simply because these two people wanted restoration of democracy in Fiji. The preeminent historian on Girmit in Fiji and elsewhere recognized and respected for his works, research, immeasurable knowledge, and a man of impeccable integrity, was prevented from coming home because the order to ban him came from the Prime Minister's office. And we all know who was the Prime Minister for the last 16 years. Mr. Speaker, the return of the University of the South Pacific Vice-Chancellor, Professor Pal Alwalia, to the USP campus a few days ago, buries the unlawful saga of him and his wife, nabbed at midnight, deported from Fiji by the very same government that now preaches, and I hear that, now preaches its own concocted version of rule of law in this parliament. The declaration of a public holiday for Girmit Day to honor and pay tribute to our forefathers whose blood, sweat, tears is the fulfillment of a promise made by the leaders of the coalition government led by the Honorable Prime Minister. To honor those who laid the foundations of a modern and progressive nation with their bare hands in polls apart from the outright rejection by the former Prime Minister on this very same floor of Parliament on my adjournment motion, Mr. Speaker, you would remember that. Almost 7 years ago in April 2016, when I asked their government then to declare 11th November 2016 as a public holiday. This was to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the arrival of the last ship carrying the Girmitia or indentured Indians. They didn't. And they talk about racial unity. They talk about one Fiji. Yet, the former Prime Minister and now the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, obviously through his now sin-binned sidekick, has the propensity to make wild and baseless accusations under the privilege accorded in this House. The decision, Mr. Speaker, to mark the life and works of Fiji's first statesman, Ratu Selala Sukuna, as a public holiday, is a slap on the face of the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, whose regime abolished this holiday. Mr. Speaker, children who are 15 years old, now almost 30 years old, they probably don't know about this statesman. To dishonor Fiji's first statesman, whose political tutelage, Mr. Speaker, shaped the ideologies of many great leaders like the late Ratu Se Kamisese Mara, Ratu Se Penayangani Lau, Ratu Se George the Kambau, and others who have studied Ratu Selala Sukuna about his contribution to Fiji and on the land issue. And many of us have benefited from reading and understanding that great man's vision of what Fiji should be. Again, Mr. Speaker, that was an assault on the values of embodiment and chiefly wisdom by a regime that not only believed in my way or the highway rule. To decide to restore grants to the USP and release the first payment of $10 million isn't unconstitutional, Mr. Speaker, but the beginning of ensuring that the university staff and students are assured that they will have the best teaching and learning environment. The payment of $200 each for every child from early childhood education to year 13, from a family earning a combined income of less than $50,000, Mr. Speaker, as back-to-school relief wasn't palatable to Fiji First. Why, Mr. Speaker? Why? Because it provided huge and genuine relief to parents and guardians and made education genuinely free. It was better than a sangamoli or $1 a day or a total of $180 for 6 months that was pre-election gimmick by the now punch-drunk Fiji First Party. To undertake fiscal review, to hold an economic summit is part of the consultative process and inclusivity of this coalition government. This coalition government. It is vastly different from an economy minister who was also the state's chief legal advisor, holding public forums around the country just for the sake of it, where civil servants are told to attend to make up the numbers, to pull wool over the eyes of the people. In December 2021, Mr. Speaker, we were told by the then PM and now Honorable Leader of the Opposition how USP students were studying in an environment of corruption. He tried vainly to justify his government's decision to withhold the grant because of some egoistic behavior of his government, and particularly of his then Attorney General, who's excused himself out of Parliament. Of course, the former government stifled any reference or debate on the BDO's report findings that incriminated a lot of personalities with all intents and purposes were sympathetic towards the Fiji First government. The rest is history, Mr. Speaker. And that sordid chapter of USP history is best buried with the deviousness of a political party under whose reign financial extravagance at the expense of the taxpayers has been in top gear, as revealed by recent findings. Fiji, Mr. Speaker, had a government that couldn't even paint our hospitals. We produced pictures in this parliament. I produced pictures of health centers around the country. Instead, it allowed grass to grow on the walls of the hospitals. Mr. Speaker, the few anecdotes that I have outlined prove one fact. It proves one fact, that the coalition government and Fiji First are like river banks, never to come together because of a gulf in principles of transparency, accountability, good governance, and adherence to the rule of law. Coalition government, Mr. Speaker, and I know the leaders, as leaders of the three parties, we know that the coalition government is here to stay and is the best alternative, Mr. Speaker, is the best alternative to put right the ills plaguing our nation for the past 16 years. This is the alternative, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on 15th October 2014, during my maiden speech in Parliament, I was very new at that time, Mr. Speaker, and you were around at that time as well. And I said this, and I want to quote, with clarity about our vision, certainty about the reforms needed to realize that, with some luck and the grace of God, a future of great possibilities lies within our grasp, unquote. The coalition government, Mr. Speaker, will reset the moral compass of Fiji. Central to this task, Mr. Speaker, is the restoration of all freedoms, democratization of institutions like the municipal councils, Sugarcane Growers Council, and Mr. Speaker, as you know, the Cabinet has already made the decision. The ministers are working on it. And he should be, on Monday, I had Honorable Praveen Bala said he would contest the municipal elections. Maybe he's thinking of leaving Parliament too, He should be thankful. He should be thankful, Mr. Speaker, to the coalition government that he will be able to fulfill his wish if he wanted to. Immediately, and I want to remind him, immediately upon swearing in as local government minister in September 2014, I remember he was sitting somewhere there. He said, he promised that there will be local government elections. That promise never materialized. What emerged was the $12 million swimming pool scam. Mr. Speaker, there will also be a review and reform of legislation imposed upon the people through decrees, which automatically became acts under the 2013 Constitution without any ratification on the floor. You also know that. Economic growth and financial stability are dependent on accountability and transparency, the two vital features of good governance sorely lacking in the last 16 years. Mr. Speaker, the coalition government, as you know, will soon hold a national economic summit, outline its plans for the future. We are consulting our citizens, our business stakeholders, and they are with us in this journey to build an inclusive and prosperous economy. Mr. Speaker, we are not daunted by the $10 billion debt because we assured the nation that we will fix it. During the last 16 years, the regime and the Fiji first government put together borrowed a whopping $7 billion. As the coalition government's finance minister, I am discovering areas of how wastage was happening, some even bordering on financial negligence, Mr. Speaker, and abuse of authority. This will be revealed in the near future. On the positive side, Mr. Speaker, there is a sense of optimism. There is a sense of exuberance. The Honourable Ministers of Trade and Commerce and Investment, Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Tourism, and myself, we've been meeting businesses, investors. There is a sense of optimism. People like this government. Yes. They want to invest now, Mr. Speaker. Yes. They are telling us, yes, and we are making that happen. And also, Mr. Speaker, with God's grace, I mean, we are seeing positive indicators everywhere. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, I want to lay that over the next 4 years, the coalition government will try and secure $1 billion worth of investment in our tourism sector, grow the sugar and agriculture industry into $1 billion industry. But these industries can and should become the bedrock of our economy. Target $1 billion worth of investment into climate resilient infrastructure and into our blue economy. Secure $1 million investment into manufacturing and food processing. There is a sense of optimism, sense of confidence. People who were living overseas, the remittances has crossed $1 billion mark, Mr. Speaker. And above all, we want to reduce in the next 4 years, reduce wasteful expenditure by $1 billion, Mr. Speaker. We will grow our economy, we will share the prosperity, and we will reduce the debt. But most important element, Mr. Speaker, in this agenda, the political philosophical agenda of the coalition government and the economic agenda of the coalition government, Mr. Speaker, is to improve the governance. Because no matter what you do, no matter how much you can juggle with economic policies, but if your governance is not right, Mr. Speaker, you will not be able to secure that economic growth. Mr. Speaker, yesterday we had a lecture on secularism from Honourable Ketan Lal, who made disparaging remarks against me and the NFP for turning a blind eye to destroy secularism. For all intents and purposes, Mr. Speaker, he was accusing me for turning a blind eye and ignoring discrimination against Indo-Fijians. The filth, verbose, the Speaker, from the Honourable Member wasn't surprising, who probably didn't realize what was scripted for him was not only derogatory but insightful.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
I know he's suddenly become a small parrot for the General Secretary of the Fiji First Party. I'm told that he's got something on him. And that, Mr. Speaker, came from someone sitting there who kept his mouth shut when Ayaz Sayyid Qayyum attacked the Vishwa Hindu Parishad organization that he was part of as a terrorist organization. He kept quiet. Not long ago, he was campaigning for NFP in 2018. I don't know what happened, Mr. Speaker, suddenly. And you can see the filth that is coming from him. Mr. Speaker, he was attacking me in Parliament when I, together with Honorable Agni Dev Singh, were in Denarau, Nandi, participating in the World Hindi Conference that was, as I said, in Hindi, officially opened by His Excellency the President. And we know, Mr. Speaker, the high-level conference is being attended by India's Minister for External Affairs, His Excellency Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar. I also said that last night the Honorable Prime Minister hosted a dinner for all the participants in Denarau. And today we are going to have bilateral meetings with Dr. Jaishankar later in the day. And Mr. Speaker, the fact that the World Hindi Conference is being held in Fiji, the fact that the Prime Minister himself, with the leader of the Sodalpa party, Deputy Prime Minister Kamkamida, and myself decided that we're going to recognize Girmit as a national holiday, shows that this coalition government is an inclusive, serious government, understanding that this nation is a multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious nation. Just like India, which is the largest secular state. He probably doesn't understand the meaning, Mr. Speaker, of secularism and ethno-nationalism. I mean, the Johnny come lately reading the script by someone who has propagated this racial hatred for the last 8 years in this parliament, Mr. Speaker. Whenever, I remember whenever a member of Sodalpa party would stand up and talk about how Itoke community in the outer islands is facing water problem, would be accused of racism. Yes. Yes. Would be accused of racism. Mr. Speaker, this government is trying to bring the people together. They did nothing. They did nothing in the last 8 years in Parliament to bring people together. All they did was to campaign on racial line. We have seen parties come and disappear. And I want to remind people like Ketan Lal that NFP is going to be 60 years old in July this year. We are the oldest party, Mr. Speaker, you are aware, in the South Pacific. And comments like that is not going to make a dent on our philosophy and our idea of what Fiji should be. We have seen, Mr. Speaker, that in the last 8 years and before that, Fiji has been governed by two men treating this country like their own personal property. And they thought that they will be in power for eternity. In fact, the honorable leader of the opposition now, he said in one of his interviews, we want to rule in perpetuity. And they talk about democracy. So the behavior and the utterances, Mr. Speaker, from the opposition show that they are actually experiencing excruciating pain at the loss of their power. And it is shameful, the kind of things they say, because it lowers the dignity. You were attacked, Mr. Speaker. It lowers the dignity of the Parliament. And they are worried that the People's Coalition government, the empathy, the compassion that we are showing to the people of this country, they know that there will be history. And the cabal that ran the country will be useless and insignificant. And this is what we want to end, Mr. Speaker. This shameful episode has become a thing of the past. Better days, months and years await our people. Because finally, Mr. Speaker, Fiji has a government of the people. Yes. The vision, I want to conclude, Mr. Speaker, by saying that the vision of Honorable Justice Jairam Reddy and Honorable Prime Minister Sitiveni Rambuka, which they set out to achieve 23 years ago, Mr. Speaker. You remember, Mr. Speaker, in 1999 we had three-party coalition. We had the SBT, we had the GBP, we had the NFP. Today, Mr. Speaker, I am proud that with Mr. Rambuka and with Mr. Gaboka, we have achieved that vision that Justice Jairam Reddy and Sitiveni Rambuka had in 1999, and we have a government, a solid government of three parties leading this nation. I want to thank His Excellency the President for his most gracious speech. May he continue to be an embodiment of chiefly authority, wisdom, and symbol of unity for our beloved nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May God bless Fiji. Thank you.